Welcome to Crossing the Enterprise Chasm, a podcast about software startups and their journey moving upmarket to serving enterprise customers. I'm your host, Michael Grinich. I'm the founder of WorkOS, which is a platform that helps developers quickly ship common enterprise features like single sign-on. On this podcast, you'll hear directly from founders, product leaders, and early-stage operators who have navigated building great products for enterprise customers. In every episode, you'll find strategies, tactics, and real-world advice for ways to make your app enterprise-ready and take your business to the next level. Today, I'm joined by Ceci Stallsmith, partner and co-founder at Calyx Consulting and former director of platform marketing at Slack. Ceci has spent most of her career thinking about developers and how to reach them, first at Box and then at Slack. Her company Calyx focuses on companies and their journey becoming platforms. We're delighted to have her here on the podcast to chat about a particular area of her expertise, marketing to developers. Ceci, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me, Michael. I really appreciate it.
All right, let's go back in time a little bit. We'll start there. Tell us about your time at Box, first in the developer relations role, and then later as the platform product and ecosystem manager, where I know Box went from 0 integrations to over 1,000 eventually.
Yeah, it was so fun. This story could be so long, so I'll try and keep it short. The journey at Box to platform was fascinating. I joined at about 200 people. Box had always had an API because they had always been sort of platform first, but Aaron was really great at sort of capturing the zeitgeist at various moments in order to grow the company. And so mobile, do you remember like 2011, Michael? Mobile was like really, really hot and exciting.
Oh yeah, it was the AI of the early 2010s, yeah.
Absolutely was. And the iOS App Store and also the Android App Store were like where VCs were like mining for new companies and everything was really exciting. So I had the opportunity. I was doing developer relations for Box, trying to get people to build with the API, which didn't really make sense because I'm not an engineer, but I was able to because the API was straightforward enough. So props to Box. And Aaron one night like pulled me and my manager into a room. This is like we would work at 10 p.m. and it was fun. What was my life back then? I don't know. And was like had this idea for this mobile ecosystem, and I got to go and build it with them. So it was really fun. I just literally was like scouring the app store and cold emailing all of these people who were building these apps in the productivity and like sort of business space. And I just got them to integrate with Box. And then we would do these big marketing launches to sort of like blow out the excitement about our ecosystem. And it worked surprisingly well. We started and launched with like 10 apps, but we got a ton of press and then grew it to 50, took on the Android App Store, grew another 50, and then grew to like well over 200 apps and stopped counting. So it was like a very, very fun, sort of crazy ecosystem journey. That there were also a lot of lessons learned too, I can share as well. But that was the experience in Box.
Yeah, going back to that, the very first, set that you did, that first 10, do you remember what the kind of catalyst was for actually doing this? Like what did you see or what did Aaron see? Was it a thesis bet? Were people already starting to use it? I know platforms are kind of always the hot thing. Everyone wants to be a platform, so everyone wants to do it. But why did you know it was the right time to do it for Box?
So platforms always were the hot thing, but I've worked with a lot of companies since then, launching their ecosystems, like getting their platforms together. And it is a little more like playbookized at this point. There wasn't as clear of a playbook in 2011, I would say. Like Microsoft and Apple had done it, but there wasn't anyone recently who had done a really cool ecosystem that everyone was sort of jealous of or wanted to be like. So one, it was still a little bit novel. Like I recently worked with launching an ecosystem for a pretty big company, and getting partners to want to build to our platform was really hard. Like everyone's been playing this build to my platform or I'll build to your platform game for the last decade, and people are a little tired of maintaining integrations. Back then, this was sort of new and exciting. We also, so that was one thing. Two, it was still some novelty to this whole effort. Two, we mobile was the Wild West at this point. So it's sort of like I would say AI is right now, where like everyone's just scrambling to build to figure out where the little growth angle is going to be that's going to make them into a big company by building with this new technology. Mobile was that at this moment in time. So there was this question of like, how are files going to move on mobile and how is mobile going to play out? maybe remember Paper? It was like a really beautifully built note-taking app. It was like the hottest thing. It took tons of money from big VCs. Like they had this beautiful office in New York. They were a mobile app. They ended up, selling to the New York Times. It didn't end up being a huge outcome, but everyone thought that like that was going to be the future, is like you're building on iPads, and it was really, really cool. So there was also this moment of hype around mobile and lots of opportunity. So people were very willing to work together. And then the last thing was we were totally exploiting like issues on the native operating systems. So there weren't secure ways to pass files between apps at that point on the operating systems, especially on Android. Or Android had like some weird protocol thing that they had. So I actually got a patent in my name when I was doing product, which is hilarious because like, how did that happen? Along with so it was really fun. And there was a lot of like greenfield for exploring how to take an API that was about moving files around securely and applying that to mobile, which then changed over time as the operating system kind of like got everything locked down. And I think you're going to watch that play out a lot right now with AI, because it's the Wild West. Like even with the announcement that OpenAI made, I don't know when this will air, but this was like yesterday, November 6th. They're kind of like resetting the ecosystem repeatedly because they're bringing out so many new tools. And like as those tools change, it's going to really change the games for what apps can do. So it's kind of like the flashlight app on iOS, where everyone had that app and then they added it natively and it changed. So that was part of the way things played out.
That's a really interesting comment about how those things end up becoming in-house, kind of native to the platform. I was literally just talking with a friend at lunch today about how all of the AI work he's been doing in a startup for the last 6 months is sort of no longer relevant given what OpenAI has announced. But you just kind of keep moving the goalposts, and they're working on the next new thing around that.
I have I have a wonderful mentor who did a lot at Microsoft, and we talk about this stuff a lot. And one of the things he always says is when you're building with a platform like that, you have to always, especially if you're like a smaller player working on top of them, you have to always be trying to see around corners, because the assumption that we're all just friends and we're all just trying to only make each other's businesses grow is the wrong one. You have to, like, if you're going to be a really cutting edge winning company built on top of a platform with an ecosystem like that, you kind of always have to be like seeing and trying to find out where they're going to cannibalize your business eventually and building ahead of it. And we thought a lot about this at Slack because we didn't want to offend our ecosystem at all, or like really destroy them. So we would do a lot to basically communicate in advance if we were going to add features, which we obviously did. Like look at all the features Slack has now that would sort of directly impact or compete with our ecosystem. And I think that just doing that like sort of one-to-one outreach or even group outreach did a lot to help the ecosystem stay healthy.
Let's talk more about Slack. I think that's a great segue. Obviously, a very different platform, different kind of type of developer, and different timing of the market and industry. What was the marketing motion there? How is that different or similar to Box? Can you talk about that? What drew people into building the Slack platform? Then we can talk about some of the specifics.
Totally. So Box was interesting because if you looked at Box, like Dropbox was in the space, and we were the enterprise option, but we were also more of a number two. Like we weren't the hottest kid on the block. Whereas Slack, we were the leader in the category. We were the thing that everyone wanted to use. People were like, we were growing like gangbusters when I joined. Again, I joined around 200 people and got to like watch a ton of growth for the company. I was like thinking and preparing for this podcast, and I hate to say it, but I think I could have been pretty bad at my job and we would have done perfectly well and succeeded. I think that my team was amazing and I think we did a good job. So I think we hopefully had an impact on like making things even better at Slack. But there was just simply product market fit. So one of the biggest things I observe, especially in developer marketing, is you can outmarket, especially products that you're trying to bring to in like a sales-led world. And you can often outmarket things in a very consumer-oriented world by like having influencers push stuff and things like that. But with developer products, there's just a different level of BS filter, I would say. I don't know if you feel that. Do you feel that in your world?
I think developers have like a very refined sense of smell for when things are just a little bit off, and it's almost a sense that other non-developers don't have. They don't even know that they're doing something wrong.
Yeah, and I actually really love that about the developer audience. There's like more discernment there. So it's pretty hard to beat product market fit. So Slack had product market fit. When I joined, we didn't have a third-party developer API. So we had APIs that you as a customer could use for your own Slack. That was it. So it was insane because we were growing so fast. Developers wanted to build these third-party apps to reach our big customer base and our very fast-growing customer base. And they would have to ask customers individually for their API keys to get them an app. And they were doing it. So they were just like doing backflips and climbing over like really impossible to scale walls in order to get apps built. So we were just like as fast as we could shipping the API to work and then launched it. And we're basically managing growth, I would say, at Slack. And then a lot of the stuff I think we did well in terms of developer marketing was, I mean, one, we just had a really high bar for how we marketed and like the way we used words and what we would do. We were really equipped to do awesome events and like sort of just bring a craftsmanship to the work that was really fun that I think people resonated with. And then we also just did we had an awesome BD team and developer relations team. And we really like knew our ecosystem. I still know the ecosystem pretty well, like get, lots of work through that ecosystem well still. So I think there was also a lot of personal touch that we did that made a big difference in terms of how we worked with the ecosystem overall. There's like a lot of basic tooling stuff I could talk about with like just opening up developer communications was a really big deal when I joined. We hadn't been saying anything. We just started sending a newsletter. We just started doing some really basic stuff, which made a big difference. So those are the highlights for me. I think a lot of it has to do with how you talk to developers. And that's like a lot of what I learned there and then had to teach the team in terms of like, you can't just cut the fluff, cut the marketing stuff, get to the meat and get it across.
Let's talk about that a little bit more, because I think, you're totally right that that product market fit that Slack had really propelled the company. My current definition of product market fit, when I talk to other founders, is when you can just keep screwing everything up and yet keep succeeding. It's just kind of you keep tripping over your shoelaces and yet you keep like scoring goal after goal with your customers. So that's an amazing thing to have and a magical place to be. But there's so many companies that have had that and then screwed it up, or they've had a product and then tried to launch for developers and totally missed. Having whether it's on tone of voice or the way they launch their platform or kind of how they connect. And the benefit of a developer platform is huge, so everyone really tries it. What would you say are the things that companies should look out for? That's a great way to market our voice to developers, and maybe what should they stay away from, or common pitfalls that you see the undoctrinated make as they try this.
Okay, I think a lot of the reason why people run into I like work across so many different companies now that I get to see and then edit the work of a lot of different marketers or people who are thinking about working with developers. Um, the I don't want to sound too mean, but the first one I see is that you take someone who does like classic B2B marketing and then you plug them into developer marketing and they're just using the language of B2B marketing with the developer audience. And this is like such basic marketing 101, but there's this understanding of who is your target user or like your persona. And part of being decent at developer marketing is understanding what developers will react to. So I'm getting to like fractional CMO right now. It's really fun. And I love working with our CTO at this company because we'll work on some stuff and then he'll look at it and he'll be like, ugh, I hate this. Like that's such an overstated claim. And developers, like we were saying, there's just this desire for things to be very honest and maybe even a little bit humble in the way they're stated, because when you're building software, you are building like net new things. And there are things that are really impressive and cool. And then there's stuff that's pretty straightforward and basic. And it's easy as a marketer to be like, oh, I'm charged with trying to make people excited about this feature of the API. So I'm going to go act like it's like so thrilling. And it's like, no, it's actually just basic and useful, and just state it as that and stop trying to hype this thing up that's actually just normal. Like if you're building OpenAI, they're not even being very hypey, but like that's really changing the world and how we think about things. If you're building an endpoint for a feature or like access management controls, that's a nice feature and you should just say it in a straightforward way because it's not like so impressive and amazing. So taking one, like reducing the hype unless something's actually really cool. Two, watching out for just like regular business jargon and lingo. Like I would just give it to an engineer on your team if you're trying to like practically do this and be like, what do you gag at? And just let them redline it. Just take someone who's a little bit like snooty about stuff and just like literally let them redline your blog or your website, because they will take that language that just like feels fake to them and cut it down. Um, those are the two big things. I think the last one that is important here, and I think I learned this at Box, which was really fun. There is a danger. It's really hard to find real technical marketers. Obviously, like usually people who go into marketing are not technical, or technical people stay in technical roles. You occasionally can, but like you can't, bet your farm on that. if you find a marketer who needs the market technical things, they need to be able to sit down with the person who developed it, the engineer, the product person, whoever it is, and really understand how it works. Because the work of technical marketing or like marketing to developers is being able to explain how this thing works without having to like be extremely technical in the explanation. It's like distilling the hard thing into something simple is really important. And often I think you see I'll work with people who don't really understand how the product works, and then the marketing is just very bad because it doesn't clearly communicate what's possible. So
Let's talk about brand a little bit because you haven't touched on this, but I know it's a big thing. We've talked about it a bunch one-on-one, and with developer products, these iconic products that developers are drawn towards, like Stripe. Brand is such a huge part of it. How do you see that fitting in? Slack obviously had an amazing brand too, and so does Box. How does it fit into kind of that like developer angle and the kind of platform building narrative?
I have a funny and weird perspective on this one. So I guess I'll just let it rip. I really think that for these types of companies, a lot of it is just determined by the founders. And I think I would actually point to that for WorkOS. I feel like you have a very strong perspective on like how the brand should look and feel, how the API should work, like how your product should really work for people. And that impacts how it literally looks and feels. Um, I would say at Slack, like, so much of that marketing brand is just Stewart or was Stewart. Like, it's hard to talk about Slack now because just, like, in your brains when you're listening to this, rewind 3 or 4 years and then think about Slack then. Like, that was just Stewart distilled, and he, like, really did get into those marketing choices. He was in all the brand conversations. He blocked brand stuff left, right, and center. Um, I think when you look at Stripe, again, the Collisons are, like, notorious for being very careful about what gets out the door for that company's marketing. And I think that a lot of their brand, and I would say this for your product too, is actually predicated on it's the product that is the brand. It's not just like the marketing stuff that is the brand. And I think there's something too, they have a good sense of like what aesthetic they want to be getting across. They have a sense of like the palette and some of like the look and feel that's going to come across in the actual like marketing brand stuff. But I actually think a lot of the brand experience that developers care about is literally the ease of use of the API or like the ease of use of the different products or like how great the examples are in the SDK. I think that's a huge part and a way more important part of the brand experience for developer products. And hey, as a marketer, it's actually a little hard to control because I don't write the docs, but I can bother people to make sure that they're managed well and have good IA and have good examples and like are doing cutting edge things. So I think that actually the docs are one of your most important brand experiences. And I think a lot of this comes to your CEO or like the founder DNA and like the feel the founders want to get across in the company. I've not seen a lot of marketers successfully like get around CEOs who have strong feelings like that. And I do see a lot of companies that are kind of like meh and brand, and it's just because the leaders don't care that much.
And you can build a successful company without doing that too. I mean, many folks do. You just don't get that the je ne sais quoi kind of like supercharge on top of it.
You don't get the like sparkle. And I think the biggest piece to it is you want people to want to be hanging out with you. Like I think the value of that brand piece is like I look cool if I'm associated. Um, whereas like you don't look as cool with a company that no one cares as much about.
Not as aspirational, sure. I mean, I can definitely tell you WorkOS, it's not just me, we obsess around it across the whole company, even down to like error messages being thrown by the API, every single customer support message, trying to make it on point. It's not just the gradient on your homepage or the color of your logo.
A disproportionate amount of it at Slack was the product and then the voice. I think that more of it was the voice than like the imagery or the color schemes or anything. And that's a combination of Stuart and this woman Anna Picard, who is one of the most amazing voice and tone people, or the most amazing person I've ever worked with on that front. She just has a real talent for this. And it was so hard. This is like a little inside Slack story. So hard to train marketers in Slack's voice and tone. It was almost impossible because people would always come in and be like, "Oh, Slack's voice and tone is so playful and fun," and then try to replicate it and then just sound really hokey and like lame. Um, but Anna had this great, she's British. I feel like there also was this element of it was a little like extra sophisticated. Like one of our tone things was we're not above a joke from English literature. Like we would just throw in little random sophisticated tidbits. Um, I'm actually sitting on a piece that I want to publish that's like this overview of sort of what you're allowed to say and not say as a Slack marketer. But it was so painful. Like we would have to put people through the ringer and then just realize like a lot of people couldn't write for the company because of that.
I want to switch gears a little bit and talk about what you've been doing since Slack with Calyx, which is, I think, generally focused on helping companies that are building platforms navigate this, whether those are developer platforms or ecosystems or just ways of working with other companies. Um, let's start off. Maybe tell me about what being a platform means to you. How would you define that? Like, what is a platform?
This is an interesting one. One of my favorite companies that I invested in when I was in venture. I printed this shirt that was a toaster, and it was like, "I'm not a toaster, I'm a platform," was the caption of the shirt. Everyone says they're a platform. Everyone is not a platform. If we're talking about what's interesting is at Calyx, I don't only work with ecosystem players anymore. I actually also just work with straight up developer products because there are a lot of them and there are not a lot of people who do marketing for them. So I work with both. I would say a platform, especially in terms of the ecosystem. I like Bill Gates' measure of a platform. I don't think I've worked with tons of platforms who have become that. His measure is a platform. It's a true platform. You've built a true platform product when the value of the things built on top of it in sum is greater than the platform itself. Um, that's a pretty hard and high order, but I actually like that as the goal because it helps you understand that like you're trying to build something that's much greater than the core underlying product, and that the platform is going to take that core underlying product and like bring it to really new heights in terms of what's possible. So I'm really into that concept. And then when it comes to dev tools, I actually think it's totally cool to be a really useful tool. And you can make lots of money that way and have a really good business. And then if people extend it, awesome.
Well, I want to also ask about something you've written about, which is your go-to-market philosophy. You have this approach to it, these like 7 principles. Can you give us a quick summary of that? Like, what's across the 7 principles, the 7 points, and maybe a little bit of color around it? Like, what are your favorite ones, or what's not been, what do people not usually adopt or recognize?
Yeah, they're all over the place. The first one is that Bill Gates principle, like the platform, everything built on top of it, and some is greater than the platform itself. The second is this concept of a flywheel. So basic, I've been at so many companies where I have to like teach people about how flywheels work. And I think that's getting more understood as people like listen to Lenny a lot and people like that. But basically, a platform makes your core underlying product more useful to more users and therefore grows it. But this is, you have to kind of like get the flywheel growing by yourself first, and then it kicks and starts to do it itself as you grow. And there are, so that's the second one. The third one, a lot of the work I do is like figuring out messaging and value of platforms. And as I've done that work, I've realized there are only actually three ecosystem value props, and two of them are nearly the same thing. The first value prop is you can make a lot of money with this platform or by building on top of it. The second one is you can get a lot of users, which usually translates to money. And the third one is this is really, really useful technology that you can use and do brand new things or really important things with. So usually you're focusing on one of those three value props. The fourth is that developers are first class citizens. I've worked a lot of places where people just don't see the developer as an important user because the customer that's paying in like a B2B scenario is often the higher priority. But if you're really trying to build a great platform, you need to treat your developers well to keep them around and to make it sustainable. Um, the third or fourth, fifth one, I think it's fifth, is that I've already mentioned this. Take your like marketing lingo, like synergy or seamless, things like that. Like just stop saying sort of classic B2B marketing words. Developers don't want to hear it. The sixth one is that like ecosystems are really messy. The term ecosystem comes from like the outside kind of ecosystem where you have a pond and a bunch of stuff is like dying within the pond, and there are a bunch of animals and bacteria that are eating that and then growing up and other things are going to eat those. It's messy. It is important, but like the growth is where is in the mess, and you do need to have people in place to kind of safeguard that and make sure it's not too like inhospitable for people. So I think that's important. And then the last one is very basic. It's everyone wants to be the center of the wheel. Everyone wants to be the platform. Not everyone is, and that's okay. It's okay to say like this is not a moment for us to build an ecosystem. It's the moment for us to build a set of really useful integrations for our users, and that moment of tipping into becoming the core ecosystem could come in the future. But I've seen that kind of forced before. Um, and I think the ones that are like most important, the developers being first class citizens one, if your product is not a developer product, gets missed a lot. And you often like throw them bad APIs with bad documentation and like expect them to build stuff. And that just simply won't work. Like it will work for a minute and then it will fail. So I think that's one of the most important ones.
Last question for you before we wrap up. A lot of folks listening to this podcast are probably earlier in their journey, maybe just getting started, maybe haven't hired their first marketer yet, even, just are early in that journey, developing their platform or product or what have you. What advice would you give out to an early stage founder, maybe looking to build that initial go-to-market team or go-to-market motion? What would you say to them?
I'm working with a really early stage marketing team right now, sort of doing the part-time CMO thing, and it's been very, very fun. Uh, I think the biggest stumbles I see people make is trying to say, oh, like our marketing motion is going to be that thing that you're not doing at all right now. And then trying to hire someone, like, let's say you don't actually have a lot of content going, but you're like, I think we need a content team. And then you hire this like standalone content person who is disconnected from anything else you're already doing. That just doesn't work. The biggest thing I'd say is if you're seeing some growth, if you're like getting users on the product, getting paying customers, you're doing some marketing. It's just a question of who's doing the marketing at the company, who doesn't have the title, and what are they doing. And I want you to find those people. It's often probably you, the CEO, or the product person. Like it's often one of those people. And write out what those jobs are and then go build the job description around that by giving that to someone who's experienced and who's done it well. Because taking your existing motion that is working and then scaling that is going to grow you. But trying to like artificially place marketing into this thing is like a huge fail. You end up firing that team and it's not fun.
I have definitely heard that story time and time again. That's all the time we have for today. Ceci, thanks again for joining us. This is really, really great.
Thanks, Michael. Appreciate it.
You just listened to Crossing the Enterprise Chasm, a podcast about software startups and their journey moving up market to serving enterprise customers. Want to learn more about becoming enterprise ready? The WorkOS blog is full of tons of articles and guides outlining best practices for adding features like single sign-on, skim provisioning, and more to your app. Also, make sure to subscribe to this podcast so you're first to hear about new episodes with more founders and product leads of fast-growing startups. I'm Michael Grinich, founder of WorkOS. Thanks so much for listening, and see you next time.